Hey there, this is John McDavitt. I am your host of The Breakthrough Creative, where we talk about the business of art and the art of business. Our guest today is Ricky McEachern, who is a fine artist who recently switched lanes in his career, changing over from engineering and sales into fine art. So, without further ado, let's get into the interview. I would like to welcome my friend Ricky McEachern here.
Perfect.
He is,
Perfect.
hey, I got the name
You
right.
did it. You did it. That was great.
He is an artist from Boston, and he has relocated to Chicago. And he has a really, really interesting background uh, as an engineer that has led him into the arts. And so I want to welcome you, Ricky. Thanks so much for being here.
I am excited to talk to you again.
Sweet. Yeah, Ricky has had me on his podcast, and then he had me on a checking in with series, and he'll tell you where to find all that at the end of this podcast. But for right now, I'd like to go ahead and just start off with asking Ricky to introduce himself. Tell me where you started out. Was art always a part of your life and your interest? And how about engineering? I'll just throw that out at you, and you can untangle that as you see fit.
Yeah. How does it all work? How did it all work to get me here? So I am currently a full-time artist, and then I also host a podcast, as you mentioned. In terms of how I got to where I am right now, I grew up outside of Boston in the suburbs in a town called Burlington, Massachusetts. I was always a very creative, artsy kid. I was always drawing, I was painting. Anytime I got a art kit, I would be like obsessed with it. Anytime we had art contests in elementary school, I would always win them. And I was doing painting, doing stories, illustrated stories. I had all of this creative energy and I was very confident about it. I never thought I was weird. I never questioned whether I was skilled or not. I just did it. And I was always just producing all of this stuff. And I probably had in my mind as a young kid, that's probably what I was going to be doing with my life, because that was how my brain was, aligned. But at some point, a couple things happened. First of all, I started getting picked on a little bit for all the stories I was creating. I remember the boys asking me, "Ricky, are you still writing all those, goofy stories?"
What age would that have been?
This would have been around fourth or fifth grade,
Okay.
when kids were becoming less kids and
Yeah.
starting becoming young adults. And so that happened. And I'm like, well, I don't really want to be getting picked on. And then the other thing that happened was I discovered science. And I was always a very curious kid. And when I started taking science classes in fifth grade, Miss Letitia, my brain like lit up. Like I couldn't believe there was actually an explanation for things. I remember being introduced to the atom, and I thought it was fascinating, and I completely got it. I completely understood it, and I thought it was amazing. And I really fell in love with science. I took to it very easily, and I sort of just transitioned my view of myself and how I related to the world and how I saw myself in the world moving forward more in a science way. At some point, I realized that I was going to have to make a living, when I was in high school. And I knew that engineering was a way that you were guaranteed a good salary out of college. There was no question. You were going to be making $40,000 a year, I think was like the number. And this was in the 80s, that was a good salary. And I knew that I could do it because I loved science and, I was pretty good at advanced math. So I did that. And I ended up, when I graduated from college, I ended up going into sales. So as opposed to going into a engineering role, I decided that I was going to do sales because I like talking to people. And I thought if I was I was going to be in a lab or in a processing plant or something, and I wouldn't be. I thought my gift was like talking to people, and the companies that I interviewed with, they kind of bought into that and they agreed, and so I ended up getting a job with my degree was in plastics engineering, which is like a form of in the chemical industry.
Yeah.
So I ended up getting job in with big chemical companies, big giant chemical companies, and I would sell their products. So it was a wonderful job, a wonderful career. But I was never satisfied. And this is where it gets back to creativity, because I had this really nice job with a company car. I had a corporate Amex card. I had an expense account, all these wonderful things for someone in their 20s. However, I was very dissatisfied. And the reason why is because there was no creativity, and that I wasn't creating anything. I was conducting transactions. I was meeting people and building relationships, but it was all about facilitating and helping a company's transactions. And I just felt like there was no, looking back on it, I'm realizing why I was so dissatisfied, because I wasn't creating anything. There was no vision of something, a beginning, a process of creating, and then an end product.
So let me pause you there for 1 second, and I want to unpack a couple of things in the midst of what you just shared. So you lit up when you talked about your science teacher. What was her name?
Miss Letitia.
When somebody can remember a teacher's name from their childhood, that is a special person.
Mm-hmm.
So she really changed, in some regards, she changed your life.
Yeah, yeah, I would say that she did. She definitely shifted the trajectory, in her and the subject matter, the subject matter of science. But it
Yeah.
probably had to do with the way she delivered it. Obviously,
Yeah.
she must have.
You had a natural interest, and so I'm assuming you're a good math guy. You're good with numbers.
I'm okay. I was never good in arithmetic.
Mm-hmm.
With like multiplication tables,
Mm-hmm.
because they didn't have any meaning. Like I can't
Mm.
remember, if you give me a phone number, I can't remember it. However, I'm excellent in advanced math. Like calculus, I thought was so easy because it's more abstract math. And always got all A's in calculus. But, with times tables, I probably wasn't the best with that.
So it maybe because it's not as applicable. Like calculus is applicable skills. It's abstract, but you're going to have to apply it to something. Is that
Well,
where?
calculus has a visual component to it. So I think that is what resonated with
Mm,
me, because it's all about you're graphing things a bit.
mm-hmm,
Have you ever taken calculus?
mm-hmm,
Okay, yeah. So you know
yeah.
that you're graphing things,
Mm-hmm.
and it has a big visual component. It's not just like memorizing a times table. And so that my brain could buy into it, and I found it very interesting.
Yeah, that makes a sense. I'm a math guy too, which is I find it interesting because I think a lot of creatives will kind of default to, oh, I'm no good at math. I can't do this, or I can't figure it out. And I don't believe that that's true. I mean, I think we all have different levels that we may encounter that we struggle with. But I think if there is something uh, standing between you and your creativity that is math, you can figure it out. So
Yeah, I would agree with you.
yeah.
But I also
So
think with sorry, but I was just
no,
one other
good.
thing about math is I think that I don't necessarily think that it is taught properly. I feel like they make it way more complicated than it
Hmm.
is. And I remember when I was taking trigonometry, I was kind of struggling with it, and in high school. And I remember Miss French, another teacher who was not my teacher, but I was in the library struggling with um, my trigonometry homework. And for some reason, I started talking to her, and I told her, like, I'm really struggling with my trigonometry, Miss French. And she came over and she said, Ricky, this is how it works. And she described cosine, sine, tangent in like 5 minutes. She
Wow.
explained it in a way that I'm like, oh my God, like makes complete sense. And that explains everything. Like, why didn't my math teacher, my trigonometry teacher, explain it in that manner? Because it was the way that it was delivered.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. The delivery is maybe as much a part of everything as the actual receiving and learning and processing what it is you're being taught.
Hmm.
So you make this decision to become an engineer, and it's because it's the kind of would you say it's the safe route toward a career, toward earning? Was that part of it?
Oh,
Yeah,
absolutely. There was no risk.
yeah.
There was zero risk.
And so when they hired you on as an industrial salesperson, you had these skills where you could be a liaison between uh, the applied services of the company, talk the engineering, talk the chemical part of it and the plastics part of it, and you also had the relational component for selling.
Correct.
Okay.
Well, in theory. So that's why I thought that it was going to be amazing, because I was going to be combining, my interpersonal skills with this, understanding of the product. It didn't matter. Like, none of the technical stuff mattered. All that mattered was that you were consistent with following up with phone calls, showing up in front of the customer, paying attention, following up with questions, fielding the questions, all of the details, none of which I was interested in.
Yeah.
None of which I was interested in. I was interested in talking to people and having conversations. I wasn't interested in, or even maybe even talking about technical problems. But when it comes to the nitty gritty stuff that they were paying and they wanted, was really someone to follow up on all of those little details. I had zero interest in any of that.
And so you must have been good at it, right? Because how long would you say you did it for?
No, I wasn't good at it at
No?
all. No, not at all. No, I was not good, and I really struggled. And I did it for 9 years. And so when
Okay.
you're doing something that you don't like and that you're not good at, that is a very, very difficult place to be. It
Mm.
causes all kinds of problems in your life.
So I've heard it said, and I've experienced this myself, that uh, people don't change until it becomes too painful not to. So would you say that you kind of reached this boiling point and had an epiphany that you got to change something?
Yeah. So, and I feel like my story is really long here, but there is another career that I had before the art.
Please.
But yeah, so basically, um, yeah, I mean, I was definitely unhappy. I was in a lot of pain,
Mm.
but I didn't know what to do. Like, I didn't know how to get out of it because I didn't have any new skills, and I also had a good job and a good career, and but it was very specific. So basically, what happened to me was we were having layoffs, and the company I think was bought by someone else. And did you ever see the movie American Beauty,
Hmm.
where they ask everyone to like write a note of justifying their job or something like that? I think
Hmm. Hmm.
Lester Burnham, I think was his name. Well, they made everyone do that. They made everyone write something that described what they wanted to do. I don't remember the specifics, but I remember I wrote the letter that was going to keep my job, I thought. And then I said, what are you doing? Like, what are you doing? You're like 31 years old. You absolutely are miserable. This is your chance to get laid off and get a package and walk away from this. And it was so scary because
Mm.
I didn't know I didn't know what I was going to do. I knew that I was interested in internet technology, because I knew the whole internet was the new thing. This was like in right around the late 90s. And so I wrote the letter that describing that I knew would get me laid off, pretty much. I told them that I wanted to be an internet technologist and I wanted to work from home and I don't want to move to headquarters. And I was just honest. And then they laid me off and they basically gave me 2 years severance. And what I did was I transitioned that into, I learned HTML and web development and all this stuff. And I ended up getting into internet consulting, which was fantastic because it was more of a creative thing in that, not that I was a designer, but I was creating something. Like we would have teams that would think of solutions for companies, and then we would build a website, and I would be the developer. So I was developing it, but ultimately I became a project manager. So again, I was like, part of this creative process where we ended up having a thing that, and then I could move on to the next thing, and then it would start again. And I loved that. Like that really worked for my brain. So I worked in internet technology, which was fantastic. It was the best industry to be in. It was great money. It was great people. I got to work with, and this was in the, 2000, 2001, 2002. So you had all of these big companies that didn't have any of these skills. And they would hire companies that I worked for, and we would come in and we were like the smarty pants. And it was really great. And I learned a lot, and I learned a lot about myself. I learned a lot about technology, how to work with people. It was a lot of younger people. When I was working in the chemical business, it was all like old white guys. So, now it was people that were all actually younger than me. So it really reactivated my brain, and it was fantastic. So writing that letter to get myself laid off was the best thing I ever did, without a doubt. So I did the second career, probably from 99, pretty strongly until 2012. And then that's when I started to look to do something different. And I was starting to get, not burnt out. I just felt like it was time for something new.
So you came to the end of that journey,
I
and
did.
sometimes we just get there, right? It's like,
Yeah.
okay, oh, I don't think I want to do this anymore. It's time for a change.
Yeah,
So
that's how it was.
so how did that feel, knowing that it was time for a change? I mean, did you know that it was going to be art, or were you baffled, or?
Not really. I knew that, I could see where things were going with what I was doing, like because I had sort of established what I was in that industry and what I wasn't.
Mm-hmm.
There was a period of growth and where you're becoming advancing, and then I got to the point where, okay, I have a great job, I make really good money, but like this is pretty much what I'm going to be doing. Like, unless, and do I want this? Is this going to work long term? And I just kind of felt like it wasn't. Like I needed to do something different. I didn't, to answer your question, I did not know what it was going to be, but I knew that I had started fooling around with paints and drawing, and it sort of, as I mentioned very early in our conversation, how I was very confident as a kid, like that little confident 8-year-old, like he was still there. And so when I started painting, I wasn't really like, oh, I can't do this. I'm like, yeah, I'm just going to do it. And I just did it. And I kind of approached it with a sense of confidence. But yeah, so that's how I transitioned into it.
That's awesome. And that sounds like it was life-giving for you to be able to move into something new. And I mean, anytime you've talked about moving into something new, you're entrepreneurial in nature, you're creative in nature, you're curious. I mean, that's exciting. That's fun
Yeah.
to do. So I guess that leads me to kind of the focus of our conversation. I wanted everybody to get to know you a little bit. And I still want to talk a bit about, your art career. I'd like to hear about that. But I'd like to frame it because, folks, we have a really interesting person here. We've got somebody who is a creative, who is math-minded, but I'm gonna push that into the engineering realm. We've got an engineer, and engineers are fascinating people because they work in systems, They know how to get things done. They work through processes. And I just want to ask you, Ricky, about systems and how being having an engineering background has benefited you as an artist.
Well, I would say that the engineering background made it easy for me to work in the internet technology space for all of those years. And that is what all of those years in that space is really what is mostly helped me. So the engineering, like that engineering training kind of formed my brain in a way that when I got into that industry, I adapted very, very quickly.
Yeah.
But then it was all that experience of the way people thought to solve problems in a big business problems in a methodical way that required multiple skill sets, all different teams of people. You have to think of things in an organized fashion. That is what has been helpful to me in the success in many of the successes that I've had as an artist.
Yeah. So you're able to uh, break a project down, no matter what it is, right? Like you've done it with the painting behind you. You've got to break it down. You're exploring ways to sell. I'll let you go into that, to sell and to market and communicate.
Yeah. I mean, I think that in general, the way that I approach anything is I think about it very strategically and big before I get into any details. So I'm always thinking about what problem am I trying to solve? And I really spend a lot of time there before I come up with the solution.
Yeah.
Because if you start coming up with a task to solve a problem, you can get down this rabbit hole in all the details that you eventually get sucked into in producing anything, that when you're done, you're like, that doesn't even solve my problem. So for instance, with a painting, you can use, when I'm creating a painting, I'll do sketches. So I will do sketches of different levels of composition. So the painting that you're seeing behind me, I did sketches where you could see the full Ferris wheel. I did sketches where you could see, this view here. I did sketches where you could see just the car. So that was kind of like the strategic thinking. Before I got any details, the problem I'm trying to solve is how do I express on canvas this idea of this Ferris wheel and this movement and these shapes to a viewer on a canvas. So I did some big ideas. Okay, so how do I want to do this? Do I want to go wide? Do I want to go small? Then once I did that, once I figured out the composition, then I do an underpainting. So then I take and I do all one color, and it's, variants of, so that's what I'm sort of starting to work on the solution. But I don't worry about any details. I'm just worrying about the placement and the relationship between the different shapes and things like that. And then eventually I will get into, at some point, I'm going to be getting into the details with the tiny little brush. But that's the very, very last part. And so the way you approach a painting is the same way that I would approach a project. Of any project, is just really thinking big and trying to, before you get down into the details. One of them, what I think is very helpful is I think of my life in terms of, specifically my creative life, in lanes. And you mentioned first things first, or beginning with the end in mind. Were you referring to Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective
Not on
People?
purpose, but I am familiar with Covey.
Oh, okay.
Read Covey.
So one of the things that he talks about is roles. So I use that, but I call them lanes. So I have different lanes in my life, and for me, those lanes are Ricky McEachern, artist, family and friends, health and fitness, E2K podcast, and Buckman Street Kitchen, which is a new project that I'm working on. And what I do is everything is grouped into these lanes. So when I am planning my week on Sunday nights, I look at each lane individually and I figure out friends and family. What do I want to accomplish this week? What birthdays do I need to go out and buy cards for? What Zoom calls do I need to schedule? What phone calls do I need to schedule? And I'm only looking at friends and family. Then I switch gears and I look at Ricky McEachern artist. And then that I can break down further. Okay, so Ricky McEachern artist, create product, create, actual production. What do you need to plan this week in the studio? Or do you need to schedule time on your calendar to produce? Do you need to schedule time out in the field with your camera to get more source material? And then I get that on the calendar. Marketing efforts. What do I need to do in terms of marketing efforts for my artistry? Do I need to do an email this week? Do I need to plan out time to produce all of the Facebook assets and all of that annoying stuff that we all have to do? But I think of each lane individually, and I block out all the other ones, and I really just think about the goals that I have in each lane. And I just that's how I always think about things. And it ends up being fairly effective.
So you have a system that you're married to that moves you forward. It really, it's a way to hold you accountable to getting things done.
Yes, but it also makes sure that you're working on the things that are important, and you're not reacting. The last thing you want to do is start your week by opening up your email Monday morning and looking at all your emails and reacting to them. If you start on Sunday night with a list of your lanes or your roles, and you think about what you want to accomplish in each of them, and you write those down, and then you fill up your calendar with the time slots to do the tasks to support those goals. Well, then when you open up your email on Monday morning, your calendar is already booked with all of the important stuff, and you're not going to be wasting your time down a rabbit hole of something that's not as important, because you've already figured out what is important for the week.
See, that's brilliant, because I think, I can be guilty of this, that I'll start working, and then I find myself 20 minutes later, I'm off on some task that has nothing to do with anything that's important in the moment. I've fallen in love with some idea that's popped into my head, and I'm kind of over here. Now, if I have a set schedule, if I have a deadline, I don't get as distracted. But I would say my free time is where I can really get distracted, because I haven't necessarily planned for it.
Yeah, at least for me, I set up appointments on my calendar for everything, for workouts, for going running, for house cleaning. I block out time for house cleaning, hour slots a couple times a week, just so that I can make sure that it gets done, because you're going to have to do the work anyhow. So if you plan it, then you actually get to live in a clean home. If you don't plan it, you're going to end up, your house is going to turn into complete disarray, and then you're going to do it. So you're still doing the work, but you didn't really get to enjoy. You ended up being in a dirty home most of the time. So if you do it proactively, and this is applicable to anything. You know what I mean? If you're proactive in it and planning it, you're going to get better results. And you're going to get better results.
When did you start doing this? Is this recent, or is this something you've done your whole life?
I would say that I haven't done it. I started doing it more consistently when I started running my own show, because it means a lot to me. My work and my business means so much to me, and it means it's so important, and that I'm willing to do anything to make it work. And when I was working for a corporate type stuff, it didn't matter as much to me. It wasn't as important. So, I'm in a situation now where I will do anything it takes to be successful and to get the results that I want. And that's not like a bad thing. Like, that feels awful. Like, it's good. Like, I'll do anything, and I'm happy to do it. And if it means I have to work on Sunday nights to plan my week, yeah, it's fine. I'll do it.
How much time do you spend planning on Sunday nights?
Um, at least 2 hours.
Okay.
At least
And
two hours.
how disciplined are you in sticking? I mean, it sounds like you're very disciplined that you plan that 2 hours, you plan that week out in 2 hours, and then you're pretty rigid.
I try to be. I love planning. Like it makes me so happy to like because it's all about hope in the
Yeah.
future and possibility. So I look forward to planning Sunday night because the fact like writing goals down on a piece of paper on Sunday night, like there's nothing better. Come Wednesday when I'm actually having to do the work, yeah, it sucks. Like anything, because you have to deal with the nonsense of life and tasks, and the challenges of getting anything done is always a big pain in the ass,
Yeah.
unfortunately. But the whole planning part is great.
Yeah. Reality is challenging. Having to do things is not always fun, but they need to get done anyway. Yeah, I love that. Tell me about your fine art. What drives you, and what do you want your career to look like? Where are you headed? What's up?
I'm not really sure where I want my career to go. I know that I want to be more than just about the paintings. I have a lot to say about my paintings, and that's why I have my podcast. And for my last show, like I did a book, a little small book to go with it, which had a narrative.
Yeah.
So I like that part of it. So I kind of want to be known as more of an artist as opposed to just a painter, because I do have a lot to say. I think that traditionally my paintings have been based on photographs that I've taken. And I'm trying to move away from that. I will in the past, I go to places and I see spots that I think are interesting and that I think are potential for paintings, and that I could bring something more to what I'm seeing and share it to the world through my eyes and my brain, and I can add something to it. And whether it is an abandoned building or whether it is a nature scene or an amusement park, but it's always been based on photographs that I've taken. So I'm looking to get away from that. I think I'm going to be trying to do some more plein air, some outdoor stuff. I did take a class in Old Lyme, Connecticut last summer, where it was 2 weeks with an instructor to sort of rewire my brain in that direction. I'm not sure if it's taken yet. I invested a lot of time and money in doing that, so we'll see how it turns out. But yeah,
Very
does that
cool.
answer your question?
Oh yeah. Tell me about the podcast. Why the podcast, and what's the podcast about?
So the podcast is called Eager to Know, and it's available anywhere podcasts are available: Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Google Play, and it's conversations with the creative leaning. So it's me talking to different creative types of people. I tend not to do visual artists. I do some, because I did speak to
Yeah,
you.
I really like episode 14, I believe. I think that's a good episode.
Okay, that's your
I think that
favorite.
was my episode.
Well, it was fun because we didn't really know each other when we did that.
Yeah.
So that's one of the reasons why I do it, because it's a great way to get to know other creative people. So the reason why I started it was I had moved to Chicago a couple of years ago. I was trying to establish myself as an artist, and as I'm talking to people, other artists, it's like I'm trying to figure out how do you get your name out there? And it was pretty much like, this is me, this is my artwork. Look at my artwork and associate me with my artwork. And I felt like there was something missing. Like I felt like you wouldn't get all of me if we just did that.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like and I like to talk to people, and I'm extremely, extremely curious about the world. Going back to the science, like why I like science. I'm very curious about how people work. So I figured I'll try to solve this problem of getting me out there in the world with something that I'm very comfortable with, which is talking to people, and not just talking, but asking people questions. And trying to figure people out and trying to make sense of what's going on. What works with, I can do that with anyone. The reason why it's particularly good with creative is that creative people tend to talk about ideas in a more abstract, universal way. So the conversations tend to be better. I am just as interested really talking to a business person about their business. However, their answers are going to be very specific. They're going to answer things in a very narrow way, and it's not as interesting to people unless you're interested in business or their particular business. With creative people, I find that they tend to talk about things in ideas, and they're much more universal, and it's much more interesting universally.
Oh, that's great. Thank you for sharing all that. I'm so excited about where you're headed. When we met a year and a half ago, maybe it was a year or 2 years ago, I was really, really impressed with how easy it was to speak with you. We just bumped into each other in this hallway at C Conference, which is an arts conference, and we spoke for about 30 minutes. I think I found out you were from Boston. You were asking me questions. I found out you had a podcast. I mean, I could have hung out with you all day. And then what was really cool was you had invited me to be on your podcast, and you wanted to learn a little bit more about me. And you were in Chicago, and so you're on the north side of Chicago, and I'm down in the south suburbs. You came and met me way more than halfway. You came almost all the way to me. And if you live in the city, you don't always own a car. And so Ricky doesn't have a car. So
I have a car.
Oh, did you? Did you drive out there?
Oh, I drove. Yeah.
Oh, see, I don't pay attention to anything we talk about. I'm too interested in me. So you drove out, which it's a haul to come down, and you came and looked at the mural with me, and we sat and chatted for quite a while. And before we even did the podcast, and it was very cool. Ricky is a very genuine person, which that means a lot to me. And I appreciated that. It looks like you want to say something.
Oh, well, I just wanted to say that your mural at the Downers Grove Library was incredible. Like, I'm so glad that I made the trek out just to see that. I mean, that was amazing.
I want to ask you, what advice would you give to the creative who wants to make the switch from a job or a career that they know isn't where they're supposed to be, that they're supposed to move into something else? I mean, they could stay in the job, but they're not really happy. It's not filling them up. It's not fulfilling them. What advice would you give to them? Easy question. I thought I'd give you an easy question on the way out.
I would say, I think the answer is going to be a little surprising because it's something that we didn't really talk about, but I think something around meditation and getting in touch with, or prayer, or whatever it is, to get in touch with what is important to you and what is valuable and what you value. So something that we didn't talk about is running is a big part of my mental health, or how I solve problems is I go running. And it's kind of like a meditative state. And for some people, it could be meditation, where you need to like pull yourself away from all of the stuff and the stresses and the weight of the world and the weight of your job to find out what is really important. And that's where you can figure out how to move forward. Because you need to do something that is, there has to be a practicality to it. I mean, if you have children, or, there's all this stuff about, money and all of that, but that's the type of stuff that stops you from thinking about new ideas and new solutions and new ways to be. So if you can pull yourself away from that, whether it's running, meditation, walk on the beach, going away for a weekend by yourself somewhere, and just forgetting about the real world with the intention of not just getting away, but intention of finding out what is really important. And then hopefully those answers will come to you, because they're not going to come to you in the chaos of the world. It's really hard.
So you're saying that uh, uh, escaping the distraction, it doesn't make the distractions go away. The real world is there, but it helps to bring clarity to what is important and then maybe how to move forward.
I think so. And, and again, for me, it's, meditation and running. People may have that, I think people, maybe you can look back in your life in the past and think of a time where you were able to sit back and pull yourself back from the world and make judgments that were based on something deep inside, and found out how you did that in the past, and do that again, because everyone's different. So you need to look at what you need to do that works for you. And hopefully, hopefully you've done that in the past, and you can find out what you did to find that place inside of you.
No, that's awesome. All right. Out of left field, your five favorite meals to cook. Because Ricky posts these delectable dishes on Facebook and Instagram, and he's very cruel because he lives so far away and I can't come take a bite.
Maybe I can mail you something. My five favorite things to make. I would say bread. So I make a rustic sourdough loaf. It's actually 4 loaves of bread. So I usually make that once a week. I love a good cream of vegetable soup. And it's cream in quotes because it doesn't use dairy. I actually use a potato. And it's fantastic, and it's easy, and it's inexpensive. I would say I love a good pasta dish with, you can add anything to pasta and it's delicious. I would say I make a pear upside down cake, which can be found on marthastewart.com, and it is spectacular. And number 5 favorite thing to make, black bean soup.
Oh, awesome. Thanks for sharing those. I'm going to go eat lunch now. Tell me, where can people find you?
rickyartist.com.
Awesome. And what was your podcast again?
Eager to Know.
I knew that. I just wanted you to say it. Okay. Awesome. Hey, thanks for being my guest. Thanks for sharing your journey, and thank you for sharing your insight into your journey. I know it's going to benefit artists out there who are looking to get to the next step or make a change and go, oh, what am I doing? And find clarity through what you've shared. Thanks so much, Ricky.
You are very welcome. It was a pleasure.
All right, you rock. I'll talk to you later.
Bye.
Bye. Hey, I just want to thank Ricky again for being our guest today on the Breakthrough Creative, for sharing so much detail about his journey and how he plans and systemizes his week through the lanes that he prepares every Sunday. And it was really interesting to get insight into his career in engineering and how that benefits him to this very day, and it benefits him creatively. And I really want to have some rustic sourdough bread right now. So I'm going to sign off and thank you for watching The Breakthrough Creative, where we talk about the business of art and the art of business. I hope that you are working on something really cool, and I hope that you find out a way to help solve a client's problems with what it is that you do, so you can make a living from your art and be a breakthrough creative. We'll talk to you later.